Five, four, three, two, one, and we are live. Welcome to the God is Awesome podcast, where we interview everyday regular Christians about an awesome and not everyday, actually eternal God. And so we have on air our guest Ashley Lancelot. We're super happy to have you. Ashley, say what's up to everybody.
Hey.
My name is Aaron. I'll be your host today. If you are joining us live, we want to really welcome you. Thanks for joining us. Give us an emoji or a comment down below, hashtag go Ashley. If you're watching this in the future, hashtag go replay. And be sure to like and share, and definitely share it with someone who you think that matches with Ashley's testimony or might be interested in Ashley's life and kind of would relate to that. Anyway, this podcast is about, so Moses, he was asked to take off his shoes when he was walking where God was. And so this is kind of where it is. We're taking off our shoes and we're walking where God was in Ashley's life. We're kind of just diving into her story today. And so I'm just going to kick it right over to Ashley. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you came from, how you grew up, stuff leading up to Christ.
Well, hi, thanks. I'm really excited to be a part of this. I'm Ashley. For those of you that don't know me, I grew up in Alaska, which is kind of fun and exciting. And I usually tell people, and they're like, "Really, Alaska?" But I grew up in Alaska, and I'm not from Port St. Lucie or from Florida. And I had an amazing home life, amazing family life. I grew up. My mom and my biological father, they were pretty toxic for each other. And so I didn't grow up with my biological father in my life. I grew up with, my mom got married when I was 2. And so I grew up with my dad, Rick, who actually adopted me legally when I was 10 so that I had the same last name as him. And he was an amazing dad. So I didn't just have like one amazing dad, but I had 2 because I still had a relationship with my biological father as well. And that grew as I got older. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I grew up in a home where I was very loved.
How was that dynamic, being loved and extremely cared for by 2 dads and a mom, I'm guessing,
Yeah.
How was that dynamic? Was that confusing at 10, before you were 10? Is that difficult? Was that just so much love that you were, like, oh, this is great? Like, how was that?
It was both, I think, because I think I was really secure that I was loved. But then at the same time, I think that there were times where it was confusing. My mom and dad ended up having my brother when I was like 3. And I remember like serious jealousy issues. And I mean, when I think back on it, I'm like, yeah, I probably was slightly like threatened that someone else was coming into my territory. I was unsure what was happening. I was unsure my role and my place. So I think that I've always had like certain doubts. But then I think I also was very aware that I felt loved. My parents did a good job making sure that I felt secure and that I felt loved.
So Typically, I guess I just don't know about the adoption process. I'm learning more about it. But how is it that someone can adopt you when you've already got like a loving father? I don't know how that works.
It was actually looking back, I think it's kind of sad. But my dad, I had to call my biological dad and ask my biological dad if my stepdad could adopt me. And so he had to give me permission. It had to be like over the phone. And I don't remember if it was like we were at the courthouse, but I don't remember if it was with the judge there. And so he had to give up his rights. And that was really hard for him because I don't think that he didn't want to be a part of my life. I think I lived in Alaska. He had a different life. He was married. He had another daughter. And I think that it was just really hard for him. So, but that's how it went. So I was happy because my last name was always different. So people used to always ask me if I was adopted. Now I could be like, are you my brother's white with like blue eyes? He's like, he's about 3.5 years younger than me. And so people used to ask me all the time, are you adopted? And I'd be like, no, he is. What are you talking about?
Jeez.
But, yeah.
So he gave up his rights.
Yeah.
But he loved you.
Because he loved me.
Did he not live in Alaska or?
No, he didn't live in Alaska. He's moved around a lot. Right now, he lives in South Carolina. At the time, he lived in Texas and in New Jersey and California. And so I think that was really hard for him.
Was he not able to take care of you, or was it just like, I mean, like, it's kind of hard for me to understand that. Like I'm just saying, if I had a kid, it'd be hard for me to, I'd be like, heck no, what, like, help me understand that.
I think that he knew that I had a really good father in my life. And I think he really just was man enough to allow my mom married my dad. My dad knew Christ. My mom did not. And that's how that introduced me to Christ and introduced my mom to Christ. And it changed our lives. And I think he had to have seen some of that change, and he had to see the healthy environment that I was in. So I think he just loved me enough to let me continue in that healthy environment. And I'm thankful for it because it made me who I am. And now I have a really great relationship with him. We talk all the time. And so, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's it like growing up in Alaska? I have no idea. I'm from California and Florida, South Florida, so I have no idea what Alaska's like.
It's amazing. I love Alaska. Yeah. It's culturally really, it feels a lot different. I think that it's just a little bit more slowed down. I think that there's more of a sense of community. Okay. That's what I think, is because I think everybody needs each other, and it's obvious that we need each other to keep, to figure things out. And I think that there's a reliance on one another, and really community is a big thing. And people are really nice, just really friendly up there.
I know of nothing about Alaska except for like the Alaskan bush people. You know what I mean? Like that is the only thing I see on TV. Like I have no knowledge.
Yeah, you probably know more than people used to know because now they have so many TV shows out there on Alaska.
Out here building stuff.
You probably know about crabs and stuff.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's great. We used to dog mush actually. My dad, we raced. My dad dog sledded. He had a dog mush. He had a whole team of dogs, and so I grew up with like 30 plus dogs, and we had puppies a lot too. So we'd count them and be like, Dad, we have 40 dogs right now. But yeah, so
that's a whole nother life. I used to build sandcastles, all right? So I don't know what that life is about.
Yeah, it's the same with snow.
You said you grew up like, I guess you had a early introduction into Christ, right?
I did.
How's that path up to Christ leading spiritually or worldview wise? What was your worldview like growing up, and what is the shaping forces that made that happen?
So I think something that, like, for those that know me, I've always really cared about what people think. And I think I've been that way since I was a little girl. So a lot of anytime anyone would tell me anything, I would like most likely believe it, which is great because I had a lot of like amazing people in my life growing up, and they told me about who God was, and I believed it. And they told me about who I was in light of that, and I believed it. But I think somewhere along the lines where the disconnect is that I really just thought I was great. And like I didn't realize that it was like Christ within me, but I thought like, yeah, I'm a child of God and I'm amazing. So I think I somewhere along the line believed what everybody told me to like my own detriment. So that anytime there was anything opposing that, it seemed to like really make me like trip up because. So
you were told like you're a princess and you loved and you're loved and God loves you and you're like, yeah.
Like my dad used to tell me like whoever you end up marrying is going to be so lucky because you're so funny and he just used to build me up. You're really awesome to be around. And anyone would be lucky. And the great things that, I'm like super grateful that I had a dad that told me things like that. But then it seemed like when life came and like, it didn't seem like they knew they were lucky. Like, don't you know, my dad said you're lucky to be with me. So like, you should believe that.
you need to know how good I am.
Yeah. Well, but so it ended up being a good thing in the sense that I was around, I grew up in church from when I was younger. I grew up going to Bible camps. I would go to like this little local Bible camp that they had, and then I would go out of town a little bit. And then when I was like 12, I started flying to the villages, and they had a camp in the village, this one specific village named Unalakleet. And I would go there, for like a month. My cousin and I would fly to Unalakleet anyway, so we went there and did like a Bible camp, and then we became leaders. And so it really started to develop who like I knew God to be, because now I'm not just a part of this camp that sings all these great songs and talks about Jesus, but I started to have to like, know a little bit of what I'm talking about myself. And I think at that point, it started to become more personal to me, at that point where now it wasn't just like, I know all the right things to say, but I need to have my own personal relationship with God. How
old are you at this time?
Well, I think this is probably around 11 or 12 or 13, right out through there. I think, as I said, I always grew up in a Christian home and I believed those things. But I remember it being more like, oh, this is my personal relationship. This isn't just like, reading the Bible and saying all that stuff's true. But now there's like a relationship that I have that's like between me and God personally that nobody else is a part of, just me and him. And so I think that was a new thought for me then, for sure. And I knew I wanted to live. I remember being in Ulickley, and I remember I flew to another village to help start a Bible camp. And the other village, there wasn't very many kids there. And I remember thinking, like, I called my mom. I got to talk to her like once a month. And I called my mom and I'm like, Mom, God just told me what I'm supposed to do for the rest of my life. And she was like, oh, really? Yeah. What's that? And I was like, I'm supposed to be a missionary. Like, okay. I'm supposed to like tell people about Jesus. Now, I think what I didn't know at that time is that I still had such a far view of like who Jesus was and what that meant. But I knew what my purpose was, and my purpose was to share the things that I was learning with other people.
Sure. So you felt comfortable enough to have a personal relation, like it's internalized, right? It's not just up here. And then to live it out, like then it spills out of your life. But there was no like understanding or right understanding. But when you're saved, who knows the right understanding? You know what I mean? Like no one knows.
Yep.
Cool. So where does life take you there? Like you're about 13 and I believe that sounds like you actually being saved.
Yeah.
What happens after?
So I'm about 12, 13. I was going to public school at the time, and I was pulled in and out of school a lot when I was younger.
I'm out. First of all, when you first said villages, like I flew to another village in Alaska, I was like, oh my gosh, I know nothing about Alaska.
Yeah.
And then you said public school. I'm like, okay, they got some kind of public school there. It's not like so we're still in Alaska, right?
Yeah, in the villages you had to fly to them because there's nowhere to drive to them. So you have to fly in small planes. They're like 6-seaters, 5-seaters, 4-seaters. True story. One time we were taking off a runway and I was in a small plane and my window fell out. That was a true story. That's just for you to. I remember sitting there and being like, oh my gosh, my window's out. And then I remember the guy hopped out of he seriously hopped out of his pilot seat, put the window back in and hopped back in, and then we kept going. I was like,
what does that even mean? Did the wheel fall off?
I don't even know, but Alaska's another world. It's another world. Anyways, I went to public school. So we moved a lot. I was pulled in and out of school growing up. I was within a year, I'd be in at least 2 different schools. My mom would homeschool me. And so to kind of just backtrace a little bit, I was very insecure for what I knew, my knowledge, because I started to grow in confidence in social areas because I knew as long as I could fit in, as long as I could conform enough to whatever the group was, I knew how to stay afloat emotionally or socially. But I really struggled academically.
Okay.
Mostly because I didn't know the same things everyone else knew. It didn't mean I didn't know things, but at the time I was just so insecure. So I really tried to overcompensate socially by being like the jokester, by being like the funny guy, by, bringing attention to myself in that way so that people can pick on me or hurt me that way. Yeah. So to go forward, I'm 12 or 13, I'm in public school, and my mom ended up pulling me out and putting me in private school and Christian school. And I went to school and a lot of my cousins went there. I started to form like friendships, like real friendships that I'm still friends with to this day. And that really shaped me because I think I cared so much what people thought, and I see God's grace in it, that he surrounded me with people that loved the Lord as well. Oh. And so I grew up like going to like purity retreats and like saving myself for marriage and all that kind of thing. And I think, and now when I look back, I think, well, I did that because it was cool. Yeah. I did that because everyone else did it. And by God's grace, what I mean? Like he allowed me, but I don't think I did that because I was like so holy and so great. I just think those things were important to me because they were important to everyone else.
Right. When you grow up in a Christian culture, right?
Yeah.
Like you still want to be part of the crowd, and that's what the crowd is doing.
Exactly.
Like, let's be pure together. You know what I mean? Like, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. So you grew up through school, through a Christian private school. Yeah. What takes you after that? Where did God lead you from there?
So after there, I went to the school. I started dating somebody when I was 16. It was actually my best friend, one of my best friends. And we became best friends. My sound just went out. And we actually were engaged through high school. So
No
he asked me to marry him, and we were engaged. And
You were engaged in high school.
yeah, I
With what
was.
ring?
Yeah, I had a ring. I had a ring.
Kind of
So,
ring pop?
you know, yeah, I know it's young. You know, at least back home, I think like at least for me, particular, this might not be true for everyone back home, but college wasn't pushed for me the same way. It was like you grow up and you get married and you work a job, and I worked since I was like 14. I worked like 2 to 3 different jobs, and so while I was going to school, and so it was just like what you do. It was like the next step, and I wasn't dating just the date. You know, it's like I was dating for marriage, and I was gonna get marriage.
At 15?
Yeah, so I was engaged when I dated him at 16. I was engaged when I was 17, and all the way through 18. And 2 weeks before my wedding, like I had family in town and everything, I was at my little bachelorette party with my cousin. And when I went home, all of his stuff was out of the home that we had got together. And so he ended up changing his mind. And it was like so devastating. It was so devastating for me because it was like I had the dress, we were ready, we had all this, everything was paid for, and him and I were really close, and we had, like, from what I understood, from my perception, we had a really good relationship. Like we were like best friends that like to ride 4-wheelers together all the time, and that like to fish and like to hike, and like I didn't really understand it. So anyway, so yeah, that was like the first trial, the first like hard thing. And it's like not the cutesy trial, not the one that's like, I'm really struggling, but I'll get through it. It was like devastating. Like I couldn't control myself. All the things I said I believed, I had no clue where to put them in light of this, you know, and it didn't match because I thought I was awesome. So why would that happen? A lot of sense.
Like your whole life, you go up thinking you're awesome, and you're like doing the right steps, and you're doing everything right, and then this thing falls apart from you. And then you've got like this, you gotta know, you said something, I gotta know what to do with all this faith stuff, that where to put it all in my life, and I didn't know. That's why it was devastating. So how does that shape you? How did that shape you moving forward? Like what happened from there?
Well, I think I just made a decision to keep struggling through it, to keep trying to make sense of it. And it seemed to be like a day by day thing, because there were days where I was like, okay, like I got this. This is for my good. God's in control even now. Like, and you know, he's got somebody for me, because it was such a idol back then to be married and to have like that secure, that person who's going to love me constantly. I needed that position secured.
So you think that's why that's an idol? So it's security. Like you wanted like a person. Yeah. Like, you know, I hear like, especially Christians, right? These Christians, especially like thirsty Christians, you know what I'm saying? Like marriage is like an idol. And like, why is it an idol?
Yeah.
Like, is it the security thing? Is it approval?
For me, I think that it was, I wanted to make sure I had a position secured that was going to always make me feel loved. I needed to stay in that space because I still had bad things that happened to me throughout my life. And the thing that seemed to hold me steady was my good emotions. Now, you know, like the fact that I felt good, that I felt loved, that I felt secure, and then I could go through anything. So I think I needed to make sure that I had like my person there, you know, like the person that was going to help me get through this. And my life at the time, here I am, 18 years old. My parents are actually, this time frame, my parents are moving to Florida. Okay. So here we are in Alaska. I have my own little house, and they are moving to Florida at the time. And so now I'm like, well, don't leave me. I can't be up here alone. So I end up at this time, I'm very confused. I'm trying to make sense of my life. And I just know that I can't be around the same people that I've always been around. It hurts me too much. We have mutual friends. I don't know how to escape the bad emotions. They're following me everywhere. And it seems to be destroying everything I knew about who Ashley was. This happy, cheerful, funny person was like dying. And so I needed to get away from it.
Wow. Yeah. So like, I mean, it's something something really core to a lot of people is like the marriage and, you know, relationship with the deepest person. And if that's stripped away or shattered, you don't know who you are anymore.
Yeah. You kind of lose identity. Yeah.
So did you move to Florida?
So I moved to Florida. My best friend got in the car with me, and she drove with me all the way to Florida, and I followed my dad. And I've done the drive quite a few times at this point, but this is the first time that I've actually driven. So it took us like
A year?
I'm thinking like, Dad, are you watching? Right? Like 6 days. No, it took us 6 days, but we didn't stop and sleep anywhere.
Did you go by, like, how many wolves did you have when it took you?
You know what's funny is I have somewhere in my journal, we counted all like the animals that we saw and the different things that we saw, and it was so cool. Yeah, my dad, which was funny, on the drive here, he had a walkie-talkie in his car and we had one in our car, and he kept messing with me, telling me that he would see animals, and I'm so gullible. I told you I believe anything. So I'm like, oh my gosh, you see that animal? Like, he'd be like, there's a camel. I'm like, where's the camel? He's like, really, Ashley? There's not a camel. Oh my gosh.
Like, aren't you like an adult at this time?
I am. Yeah, as you'll find out later, I struggled with codependency a lot, and it really factors into that.
That's funny.
But so yeah, I
moved to Florida. You get to Florida.
I moved to Florida. So at this point, my engagement had been broken off for about like 7 months. So I have not been with my ex-fiance at this time for 7 months. I'm still trying to figure out my life. I moved to Florida, and the first week I moved to Florida, I meet my husband. I meet Jody. I went to Walmart. It was Mother's Day, and I was going to make my mom a cake.
Walmart. The most romantic place.
Johnny's always like, you can literally find anything at Walmart. Oh my gosh. He thought we should write Walmart because maybe we could get a Walmart wedding, and it would be like, you know. That's
what everyone wants.
Yeah. Like a little TV show. Anyways, so I met him in Walmart. I met him in line. He saw I was wearing a North Face jacket, and he's like, you're not from around here, are you? And I'm like, no, I'm from Alaska. And all the typical Alaskan questions. Have you ever used the harpoon that came out? Anyways, like, did I live in an igloo? What did we drive around? Like, all the questions. I did not know about I was like, you're so funny. Anyways, but he ended up inviting me to International House of Prayer, IHOP, where he was playing. And so I went and watched. He seemed safe because, you know, he's singing Christian music up there. He seemed like a good catch. I started going to his church, High Point at the time. And we started dating pretty quickly after that. So at this point, we're dating, and he ends up moving to New York to take a job. And I'm becoming very insecure. And so if I'm like really honest, I put a lot of pressure at him at the time. That's like, well, we need to figure out what we're gonna do at this point, because you have to, from my perspective, my secure, feeling loved person is like going away, and I don't know where he's going. I don't know what's gonna.
You didn't go with him.
No, I stayed here. We were long distance. Yeah, okay. We were long distance. He took a job there. We were just dating. So at this point, I'm here in Port St. Lucie. We're dating. We've been dating for like probably like 10 months maybe, or maybe going on a year. And he ends up asking me to marry him. So we got married a year and a half later.
All right.
So yeah, I was bound and determined to get married. So I did it. I did it, guys.
Sweet. Congratulations.
Yeah, but it was not what it seems like. That seems to be the next chapter of my life, because I mean, the wounds and the confusion and the heartache that I was feeling, and the lack of identity that I was feeling with my previous engagement, they didn't leave me. They were there. In fact, they actually pushed me to put my insecurities and my nerves on him, because I didn't want to do this long engagement. I didn't want that to happen again.
So you leaving your previous relationship with all the baggage and the shatteredness and all that stuff, and you just, in your brain, I'm guessing in your brain, you found someone else to just kind of do what the other person couldn't do.
Yeah.
And to be that like safety, idol of security for you that makes you feel good when the world, because you know that the world is hard, but you need one person to always be making you feel good.
Exactly. And you know, while we were dating, when we were together in the same location, it seemed like we gelled pretty well. Like we had a pretty good relationship. But the minute it went long distance, the minute I started to become really insecure.
What does that look like?
Well, all of a sudden, I don't have this constant reassurance that he loves me all the time. He's not saying it as often. I'm not talking to him as much. I'm not seeing it through the time that he's spending with me. He's not, he's not doing, in my mind, he's not doing the same things that he's always done. But really, the reality is that the situation's changed a little bit,
Sure.
And my needs, I started to become more and more desperate, that my needs needed to be met, and we needed to find a way to meet these needs.
And so marriage was that way.
To me, we did go to like premarital counseling. and at the time, and we were advised to get married. Like,
Okay.
yeah, you should definitely get married, be together. So we did. We got married, and
Looking back on it, was it good advice?
I mean, I'm very grateful that I'm married today.
Sure.
Looking back on it, I don't think it did what I was looking for it to do. So I think it might have been good advice, but it might not. It wasn't for what I thought it was. I thought it was going to make me feel better. I thought it was going to give me the security and the identity that I was looking for. I'll be a wife. I'll know my role. I know how to play that role. I've prepared myself for this role. I'll be a mom. I'll be really good at it. And what I found is when I jumped into that role, it was not the way I thought it was going to be. It was very, very confusing to me.
So what happened? Like as a mom and a wife, why was it confusing?
So here I am in New York. I moved to New York because Jody had a job in New York. So we got married. We went on our honeymoon. And then the week after, we were in New York and we're living this life together. Just me and him. This girl that's never been away from her family, who's lived in this small town her whole life, is now like on the streets of Manhattan. Jody's telling me not to show weakness and look people in the eyes as I'm walking. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where am I? What happened? Yeah, it's a cultural difference in the place that I'm at, but also we get there and Jody's, before we got married, he's like, look, I'm looking for this partner. I'm looking for a partner. I have goals in my life and I want someone that's going to be able to come alongside of me and reach those goals with me. And I'm like, great, I'm going to be great for that. I'm great at everything. My cockiness. I'm not really listening. Yeah, so great. And I get there and I'm like, I start to look for like this playmate. You know what I mean? Like I start to look for that like BFF, that person that's like just going to go on adventures with me and just have fun and laugh with me all night. And here we get there and Jody's like working and studying all the time. Like at the time he didn't have a job quite yet. So he's studying these programs and he's trying to learn these programs really quick so he can go out there and provide for us. He's taking his role as a husband like extremely important. And I'm like, hey, don't forget about me, and I'm starting to become more and more insecure. And he feeds into that insecurity because he's not really paying a lot of attention to that. He's paying attention to the things that he needs to do in order to provide for his wife and to be responsible in the way that he feels God's called him to be responsible. So there seems to be a disconnect because in that he starts to see more immaturity and foolishness in myself. And he starts to call me out on some of those things. And now, Aaron, this is the first time I think, if I'm really being honest, my mom had told me things that I don't like about myself, but I just pretended like my mom was crazy. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Mom, if you're watching. No, I used to always call my mom crazy. And really it's to deflect because she would say things about me that I've never heard before. Like, like you're super selfish, Ashley. Like all you care about is but you think the world just revolves around you. And she would say things to me like that. And I'd be like, she's so crazy. Yeah. And then I got married and some of the same things that my mom had said to me, Jody started saying to me. Like, or you just see what you want in this moment right now. And he would start to say these things to me. And what happened is a mental switch began to happen where I made him my enemy. I made him someone I couldn't trust. He was someone who didn't tell me true things. And I needed to just surround myself with people that told me true things about who I was.
And you're getting true confused with difficult.
Yes. So I think that if it didn't feel good, it wasn't true. If it didn't feel right. If you told me I was selfish and I didn't think I was selfish, then you could say it all day long, but you just be cray in my head. Yeah. And so I think that's what happened was, so now we enter into this marriage. And so for the first 5 years, I could probably chop up to being like this really difficult season in my life where I just didn't know who I was. My whole life, I knew who I was. My whole life, I was like funny girl. I was fairly popular. I mean, I didn't have a problem making friends and I fit in. I always fit in. And now here I am in New York. I'm not working because I don't have a college degree. I don't know what to even do there at the time. I'm with a man that seems to be like, he seems to fit into this world in Manhattan and I don't. And he seems to like be really preoccupied with other things other than me. So like, I'm not as important to him maybe as I thought I was. And he doesn't seem to making me feel loved his idol. Meaning like he did make me feel loved at times, but that wasn't something he was necessarily like pursuing Ashley to have good feelings all the time. Right. And that was really confusing to me. It was really confusing because I just didn't. That's what you
went into marriage for.
That was my goal. And so it's like, what are we doing here? You know? And at one time he even told me, he said, I just don't know if I love you. And I remember being like, what? And he was like, the way that you want to be loved. You know, the way that I defined love, he didn't know if he felt all those things. He was committed to loving me in action by like being there, providing these things. And he was, you know, and he was also really confused himself. Like he's with this girl that seems straight, seems like she's a great partner. And all of a sudden now she's like this emotional mess. Like I think I cried every day for like 5 years.
No kidding, huh?
I'm not even exaggerating. You could ask him and he'd be like, yeah, every day.
Every day.
Every day. It was like
so help me like put some meat to it. Like what happened? Like did you not just the feelings, right? Did you say like, hey, can we go out? And he had to work or he was
independent from me. That's what it was. I thought it was a dependency on each other, meaning we did everything together. Like you might go to work and I might go to work. You know, I started working at a Christian school at the time and I might go do my thing. But when we come back, we're just going to spend all of our free time together. Like buddy. I don't know what I thought. Looking back at it, I'm like, I don't know. And he had so many, if you know my husband, he has all these dreams and all these visions of what he's working towards. And he's always been that way. And so he was doing what his plan was. He was working towards the things that and I seemed to be like this emotional blob. But even when he came to me to try to help me, like nothing he said helped me. Nothing would make me feel better unless his life just revolved around me. And
wow.
It seemed to be the pivotal problem where he's like, listen, I'm going to keep moving forward because I think this is what God's called me to do. And I want you beside me, but I don't know how to fix like your emotionalness. I don't know how to do.
Is that codependency that you were talking about here?
Yeah.
Like, where you needed him to be everything for you at all times.
Yeah. I don't think I knew that was what it was then. I think I just thought like, I'm justified in feeling this way, you know, like I'm away from my family and he should be, you know, a better husband to me. And so I'm just going to pray for him.
So how does someone figure that out? Right. Like, so what if we have, I don't know, a couple friendship or whatever, like some couple and one is codependent, but they don't know it. Like, how do you figure that out? How did you figure it out? I don't understand.
So for me, I ended up having my son. We've been married 2 years, like 2.5 years when I had Sean. And I told Jody that I don't want to live in New York anymore. I don't want to live I was so lonely. It was like the loneliest place for me. This girl that needs people. I was very isolated. So I wanted to come back to Florida. So we moved, actually, I moved with Sean to Florida and Jody came after a few months later. And I started going to this church called Word of the Cross, WOTC. And it was, they were friends of ours before we got married. They were friends of Jody's, actually. He introduced me to them and I knew them. They were, some of them, you know, a lot of them were at my wedding. And so I went to this church, a group of friends had started this church plant and I went to that and I started to really deepen in my understanding of who it was that God was. I remember one time specifically sitting at church and Danny Vera was speaking and he was talking about the law and he was talking about like, what is the law actually there for? Like, he's like, you know, we often think it's there that we can try to keep it as best as we can, you know, and we just try not to fail. And I'm nodding like, yeah, that's what it's there for. And he's like, no, but it's there to shine a light into our own hearts. It's there to show us our own darkness. Like it's there to show us that we cannot keep the law. And so I remember it being like, all of a sudden, how I'd understood all my faith to be like, everything was just me trying my hardest. So I couldn't, in my whole life, I don't think I could have tried harder. I was always trying my hardest. Like I was praying, I was going to church, I was involved with Bible studies. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I tried to eat healthy, I tried to work out. Like I always try to do the good things. Yeah. So I don't understand why things weren't happening in my life the way, you know, but at this point, I'm still not understanding my own codependency. So I'm blind to that, but I'm like, what is going on? So, Jody actually moves back to Florida. We're in Florida, but we're still struggling. We're struggling. And it seems to be just a vicious cycle. It seems to be something where I'm constantly running to my friends being like, this isn't right? Like he doesn't care about me the way that he's supposed to care about me. Right. You know, and I'm constantly telling everybody that I can think of my story because I want to be validated. I want people to understand like, yeah, this is hard. I want to be the victim is what I want.
You were trying to win people over to your side.
Definitely. And I don't even know that it was malicious. It was just like, this is bad, right? Yeah. Like, am I going crazy? Like, or is this okay? Is this how your marriage works?
Were you blaming him? Were you being like, he's
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So at this point in my relationship, I don't know if you had asked me, if I'm being very honest, if you had asked me, what is one problem that you contribute to the relationship? I would have had a very hard time finding one problem. So I see, like I heard Kelsey and her, she talked a little bit about legalism a little bit for a second, but I see like my own like self-righteousness, thinking that I'm the one that I've got this. And if he could be more like me, we would have a great, healthy marriage. And because my marriage is such an idol, this is the only thing I care about. Like here I have my new son and I love him, but like nothing in life is good. I'm depressed. I'm in a bad headspace, and it's all because I don't have what I want. I want all the good feelings that come with, like, that I see that come with marriage.
What was it about good feelings, right? Like, was it just that I needed to be in this state of good feelings all the time, or and Jody, my husband, is supposed to be that that catalyst for you, like, and you were just he wasn't willing to do that for you, or I'm not sure. How does that play into it, like?
Well,
What
I think
so angry, like what, or was there anger? I'm guessing there was anger, right? Like
so there was, and you know what? If I really like boil it down, I think Jody's the kind of person that doesn't want to be put in a box.
Okay.
Meaning he doesn't, like, if you see the stereotypical, what, like if you look on Facebook and you see all the pictures of what looks like a happy marriage, Jody's the kind of person that he's not going the stereotypical way. He's going a different route. That doesn't mean that he doesn't love me, or that doesn't mean that he's not, the same emotions aren't there, but he didn't do things the way I wanted him to do things, which means if everyone was going to the park if all the husbands were going to the beach with the wives and there was going to be this big family beach day, Jody would have to stay home and work. And it would be like, do you even care? Do you even try to do the things that I want to do? You know, like it would be like this whole, like, he doesn't even care about me. And we've talked.
So Jody doesn't like being told what to do or put in a box, and you wanted to put someone in a box.
Absolutely.
And so that was a big clash there. Like, this is how
that would be the good feelings. My feelings would be like validated if he loved me enough that he did the things I wanted him to do.
That's rough. It's a rough
thing. And I think it's a rough thing on both sides, because I don't even realize at this point that I'm doing anything. Yeah. I don't know what's going on, but he sees this like I'm not going to fit her mold. And I don't know that it's healthy for me to play this, you know, this part that she wants me to play. I don't know if it's good for her. And so anyways, we go through this like really rough time. So we get to this pivotal point where we're married about 5 years. I have Addie. She's about like 6 weeks old at this point. And we're just at our wit's end. So at this time, it's funny because we did these Myers-Briggs personality tests. Have you heard about them?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so we did this Myers-Briggs personality test, and Jody does his, and he's like an INTJ. So if anyone knows Myers-Briggs, they'll know, like, okay, he's like, it's funny because like he's like the jerk of all the personality types, which is funny. Like, see, look, and then I'm an ESFP, which I'm like the emotional, like, lovey-dovey teddy parrot of like all the personality types. So we do these personality tests and we start researching it, and Jody comes to me at this time and is like, look, all the research I've done says we're not like compatible. Like, we're not going to make it. We're toxic. I think we need to like take a step back. He's like, I need you to do your research, and if you can find anything that's like that says that we'll make it, we'll keep doing this, you know, like let's see what we can find. So I do this personality test, and I start looking into different people, the INTJ versus the ESFPs, and everything I'm reading says they're like horribly toxic and that, like, they'll never make it. So by the end of the week, I had my ticket booked to go back to Alaska. So my best friend bought me the ticket. They got me a car. My other best friend let me stay with her for a year and a half. Jody and I were separated for a year and a half at this point. And he never asked me to leave, but he's like, if this life is too hard to live with me here, doing this life with me, then go. You know, like, I don't know what else to tell you. And at this point, I'm kind of calling his bluff, although I've always believed that God told me to stay faithful in my marriage. Like, I knew that. Like, I had that message from the very beginning that like he was going to redeem my marriage. And it was so confusing to me going to Alaska because I don't know who I am at this point in my life. There's no identity. All the identity that I had when I was a kid about I'm great, I'm these things, I just don't know who I am because I have Jody telling me these things that are not familiar. Like, I don't know if those things about me are true. And these things that he's telling me, some of them out of frustration, you know how it is when you're fighting with someone, but some of them are like, Ash, you need to really take a look at yourself. Like, you're really codependent. Like, you need me for things that you shouldn't need me for. Sure. Only God can fill those things. And I'm like, you're crazy. I need you for normal things. Yeah. So anyways, I go there. And so I quickly realized when Jody's not a part of the equation, we didn't talk for like a few months, when he's not a part of the equation, I realized that some of the same problems that I was having in my marriage continued to persist. They continued to be there, regardless if he was part of the equation. So I ended up going to counseling, and I realized that I'm very codependent. In that, I ended up going to Celebrate Recovery, because they have a program for codependency up there. So now I'm in Alaska. I have 2 kids. I'm working at CareNet Pregnancy Center as the director of client services up there, and I'm going to counseling, and I'm going to Celebrate Recovery, and I'm learning about codependency, and I'm realizing it's a real problem. It's a problem, a problem where I am taking all my emotional needs and I'm waiting for someone else to now figure them out, and I'm putting all of them on another person. And I think that's suffocating for him, someone that has lots of goals and lots of visions of where he thinks God is calling him to be. And now he's got to deal with this emotional drainage.
Sure. It's a burden that gets placed on someone else. Yeah.
And I don't know how to stop. So at this point, I'm going to counseling and I'm learning, and Jody and I start talking. And to fast forward to the story, I've been there a year and a half. While I was up there, I have one of my best friends, who's my cousin. His name is Jason Bourne. He committed suicide while I was there. And it was actually while Jody was visiting me for the first time in a year and a half. And I get a call, and he shot himself. And I think about the month before, we were sitting there talking about where we were at emotionally. And we were at such a similar place. We were at this place where this is where we're at, but what do we do about it? You know what I mean? How do all the things that we grew up believing and learning, where does it apply to us now? How does it help us out of this situation? So I ended up coming back to Florida. And I think a lot of it too is because I was just I was scared of where I was headed. I realized that I had put some of these things Jody was saying to me, some of them were valid, and I needed to hear him. He wasn't my enemy. He didn't need to be my enemy. My enemy was myself.
Sure.
It was my own insecurities, my own inadequacy, my own unsurety of who it was that God was, and what that meant in my life, and the fact that I couldn't figure out how to apply it, and then I made it his problem. I made it a marital issue, and it seemed to me I don't know that we had all the marital issues I made out. Some of them may be valid, but some of them were just problems that I had created in my head because of my own perception of what was going on.
You projected your internal issues to Addie. Yeah, for
absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. So I come back to Florida at this point. Addie's 18 months, a little bit over 18 months, and Sean, and we decided to start fresh. We're going to be friends. We're going to just he's not going to be my enemy. We're going to just hear each other out, and we're going to grow and learn. And it might have been the first time in my life that I was willing to just trust Jody. Just submit to him, just not fight him and try to act like he's against me, working on a different plan than me, but to just put my guard down, and the things that he's saying, I needed to consider them. Yeah. I needed to consider them to be true or not. Not everything's always true, but you need to consider them. Sure. And I think when I started to consider them, it really deepened my relationship with God. Because I realized it wasn't just Jody trying to tell me these things. It wasn't just my mom trying to tell me these things. It was the fact that God himself was trying to tell me something. Sure. And I couldn't hear him. I put it on a person. I'm oh, Jody's the problem. My mom's the problem. These people are just they need to fix themselves and learn how to deal with people. And I realized is God himself was Ash, everything's not about you and where you're feeling emotionally. And some of these things you have to work through, and it's going to be hard. And there's going to be bad emotions that come with that. Yeah. And you have to be able to handle that. You have to be able to stand up through that,
Wow.
So
that's amazing. Yeah. So, and then I'm guessing from there, it just kind of built into you're rebuilding your relationship, rebuilding your marriage, rebuilding your family.
Yeah. And rebuilding it on true things. It's so what happened is I had built everything up into that point on my emotions, meaning whatever I felt was true. And so this is a whole new season of life now where, and I think it's probably the last 5 years where I'm building it on.
You're testing your emotions against truth.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't even realize how emotional I was. And now I just, all my friends and you included can laugh at it because I'm highly emotional all the time. And it's crazy because I know truths, and I still, you think, oh, does that mean my life is fluffy now? And it's well, no, it's still a battle because I perceive things the most selfish way that I could perceive things always. Meaning I perceive everything's about me. So anything anyone does that's wrong or not nice, I think it's about me. It's a personal vendetta. So I have to have Jody and I call it breadcrumbs, but it's it's truths that bring me back into a sane way of thinking, into a reasonable way of thinking, into who it is that I actually believe.
Like,
exactly.
Little bird, like, all right, this is true.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. He's not my enemy. Okay. It's not a problem with me and Jody. Okay. It's not like my kids aren't a burden to me, which is like awful, but you start to like think that. You start to think everything's about your comfort.
Well, the thing is, like, people forget, right? And I think you said this on Thursday. Like, people forget like what a reality is because they're so clouded by their emotions that it leads them to believe another perception of reality, which is not true. Yeah. And so then you have this issue where, like, you need to remind yourself. This is why I think we have to remind ourselves of the gospel every day, right? Like, I mean, this is just what has to happen. Yeah. Remind ourselves of God's promises, God's truths. And I think we forget that all the time. Very forgetful. Definitely, you know, and I have to, like, it's like a little pep talk to myself, you know, and it's like, okay, Ashley, God is in control. Right now, he's in control. He knew this moment was going to be here. He knew this emotion that you're feeling was going to be here. Okay. And the emotion isn't just for you to feel, but it's for you to learn. It's for you to grow. Okay. There's this trial, you know, it's like, you just keep telling yourself that it's not about like how you're feeling when you're going through the trial. It's about like who you are when you're going through the trial. So even our emotions are like, God, like, is trying to help us to learn and grow from not just the situation, but who we are at the time, and grow from there. Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, definitely, because I you know, and I never try to paint like emotions are bad, because they're not. They indicate something in us, so we should pay attention to them. But the thing is when we allow them to start dictating us, and we believe our emotions over truth, and we start to make decisions or treat people a certain way because of our emotions, it seems to be like it causes a lot of trouble.
Yeah,
you know.
Absolutely. Let me before I ask you something, I want to ask you a couple closing questions, but before we do that, we want to give a quick shout out to people who have supported and have tuned in through the live feed. Kelsey, Nelson, Melody, Felicity, Taylor, Lindsay, Raf, Kim, Eric, Reva, Vinny, Colleen, Ashley. There's a lot of people here, like Michelle, Lindsay, Dan, and Mike. There's probably more I forgot. I'm just reading the comments really quick. Thank you guys for tuning in, supporting Ashley. What do you have to say to someone who might be, I don't want to use the term over emotional, but maybe regularly has their emotions cloud their judgment, perception of reality, understanding of whether someone is for them or against them, right? What would you say to that type of person right now if there might be someone who might be struggling with that kind of stuff, who and might not even realize? Maybe it's someone, I mean, it took you a while to realize that your emotions were like just so gripping, it made you codependent. What would you say to someone like that?
I would say the first step is to step out of yourself and look at this through a different perspective. Because I think we're often too deep into what we're going through and too deep into our emotions to even think logically. We don't know how to get out. We don't know how to start thinking realistically with some of these situations. So I think that the way to do that is to try to take it from a different perspective. Try to look at whatever it is you're going through someone else's eyes. Tell yourself the whole story. Say it out loud. Say what's going on, and then listen to it for a minute.
That's very practical. Oh, yeah. Just say the story out loud and say the facts out loud.
I think that's why people say journal.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
You know, it's just hearing yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, is there any last thoughts or statements you have? We're wrapping up on time here. Is there anything you would like to close out with? Otherwise, I'll ask you my last question here of the podcast.
Well, I think ultimately, just if I had to summarize like my story, is that I think I cared my whole life what everyone else thought of me more than I cared about anything else. And I think that's why my marriage was my idol, is because I wanted to appear like how everyone else looked like. I wanted to somewhat conform to the majority, you know, like I didn't want to be different. I didn't want to be the one that was adopted. You know, I didn't want to be that. I wanted to be the one that fit in, that always fit in. And I think my advice would be like, that shouldn't be our goal. Sure. As Christians, it shouldn't be our goal. It shouldn't be something that we are sacrificing other things or other people for those goals, because it's not a healthy one. A healthy goal is to be able to plant our feet like on true things, reasonable things, and things that we can look on paper like, yeah, that's what we're pursuing. And everything else that I'm doing, they fits into that. Even if my emotions don't always fit into that, like what I'm doing fits into that. So I guess my most practical advice would be like breadcrumbs. Write them down. Tell yourselves all the truth that when you remember that truth, it pulls you out of it, you know, and so that we can live in a healthy mind frame, we can live somewhere that we actually we believe, in truth. So.
Absolutely. And it's still a journey. Where are you headed from now? Like, what does God have planned for you now? Like, as you said, it's been about 5 years or so, like having this kind of epiphany or like rework, start to rebuild.
Yeah.
Where are you headed now? What's God got plans for you?
Well, now I'm still actually writing my breadcrumbs. And I've been trying to write them more and more, because what I realize is that I'm not the only person. This might be my story, but I'm not the only person that's gone through these emotions or that are going through these emotions. And I can't even be like, I never think that way anymore. I'm never emotional. I'm still emotional. So it's just still very relevant to me. I still have to constantly remind myself that. And some of my truths change. Some of the things that pull me out of it change, and the truths itself don't change, but some of the things that pull me out change. And so I need to constantly be working on that. So I think for me, it's just living the things that I'm saying and that I believe, and now making sure that, like, regardless of my emotions, that I'm living there. And so that seems to be kind of a fight for me, a daily fight for me. And I'm doing that through reading my word. I read it a lot because I don't know, for me, it's like, well, I can believe what other people say, but I've done that my whole life. So let me just depend on him to help understand what it is that I'm reading. And let me just read it and try to figure this out. What does that word mean? Let me look it up. Let me, let me hear things. Let me just study his word. And through that journey, I think he's like, God is revealing so much to me through like life, through people around me, through my kids, through my husband, through my friends, saying whatever it is, pointing out truths to me, and I'm able to hear them. So it just slow down, listen to people around you that are talking to you, consider it to be true. Don't take everything everyone says as true, consider it to be true, and then test it against what you know to be true.
Well, I love what you said about getting back into reading your word, because like if you're trying to find some breadcrumbs of truth, you just need to go to the the bread of life there. So it's just
definitely
always there for you. Ashley, it's been a pleasure to interview and talk about your testimony, and seriously about like your marriage. Thank you for being so open and honest about like the struggles. A lot of people, this might be something that a lot of people might struggle with, and that it's very private. So very grateful that you're able to share with us. I'd like to ask you one final question though.
Okay.
Why do you think God is awesome?
He's awesome because he never stops pursuing us. He's like, no matter where we go, no matter how far we go, it's like we never stop being something that he's constantly reeling us back. He's constantly reminding us the truths that we're like, no, we want to forget them. Yeah. And he's constantly like, no, child, come back. I'm going to remind you. So I think he's awesome because he loves us so much. He doesn't leave us wandering.
For sure. Well, thank you everybody for joining us on the podcast today. Everyone live who tuned in and everyone who's supporting. If you're watching this in the future, #replay for us in the comments so we could keep an eye on everyone on like where everyone's coming from. This is the most important thing. If you know someone who's going through like the same type of marital problems or the same type of emotional problems that Ashley went through, send them to Ashley's way. Share this video with them. Like, get involved, put them in this community. Maybe it'll help. That's the whole point of this kind of stuff. Anyway, Ashley, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everyone for joining us online. We love you all. And we will see you guys next time.